Okay. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Sorry for the irregular internet delays, but we seem to be up and running. So Amar Rav Huna Berei Amar Rav Huna Berei Rav Yeshua Nitzoitus Ein Mehem Mamish. So the Gemara asks a question on why Nitzoitus is not considered Mevatel Ki MeHechano, and the Gemara answered Nitzoitus Ein Mehem Mamish. So we saw that Rashi says Ein Mehem Mamish Umutza Litlon Acha Shanoflu L'Soichei. They don't have mamish, and therefore you're allowed to move them after they have fallen into the Keli. The Magen Avraham asked, why should Efer, ash, not be Muktza? The Shulchan Aruch says that ash is Muktza, and therefore he amended the Gis and Rashi to say that Ein Behem Mamish Umutza Litloi Acha Shanoflu Misham, that you're allowed to move the Keli after they fell into there. Now, it's important to know that whenever we ask a question about whether you can move a Keli that has Muktza inside it, there are really two shilas that we're asking. Shaila number one is, has the utensil become a bossis and therefore become Muktza in its own right because it's carrying in it ashes, something Muktza, and therefore the utensil itself has become Muktza. And shaila number two is, even if the utensil isn't Muktza, can I move the Muktza item via moving the Keli, which is called an Halacha tiltul min hatzad, an indirect moving of Muktza. So it depends on the details, but generally speaking, if I have a pot or a bowl with something Muktza sitting inside it, both those reasons will apply. I can't move the bowl because by moving the bowl, I'm moving the Muktza, and that's tiltul min hatzad. And I can't move the bowl because the bowl has become Muktza because it's become a bossis. If Rashi is saying that Mutter lit lon achash naflu l'soich, it's mutter to move them after they've fallen inside it, then what Rashi is saying is that the ash is not Muktza, and therefore there's nothing to talk about. The ash isn't Muktza, so the Keli isn't a bossis. If the Keli is not a bossis, there's no Mevatel Ki MeHechano, end of conversation. If, however, we go with the Magen Avraham, the Magen Avraham is saying that the ash is Muktza. That's his question on Rashi. He says, how can you say that ash isn't Muktza? Shulchan Aruch says that Efer is Muktza. So he says it means Muktza litlo, you're allowed to move the Keli. Why are you allowed to move the Keli? So first of all, why does Rashi say that ash isn't Muktza? Rashi was told that this ash is a very fine powder, soot powder. That's not Muktza. When the Shulchan Aruch said that Efer is Muktza, it means proper ash, ash with body to it. But just fine soot that comes off the nitzoitus, the sparks, that's not Muktza, and therefore it's not a problem. The ash isn't, the fine soot is not Muktza, therefore the Keli is not Muktza, and Mevatel Ki MeHechano. According to the Magen Avraham, the fact that the soot is ash. So what's the Gemara's answer of Mutter literally, that you're allowed to move it? So you have to say that even though the ash is Muktza, nonetheless, it's not choshev enough to make the Keli a bossis to it. And therefore, Mutter literally, that's what Rashi says, you're allowed to move the Keli, because it's not choshev enough to make the Keli a bossis to it. The whole idea of bossis is that somehow the utensil becomes negated to the object it's holding. In the case of this soot, which has no chashivas whatsoever, is not chashuv enough to make the utensil Muktza. That's stage one that you have to say in the Magen Avraham. But you also have to say another chiddush in the Magen Avraham, which isn't really a chiddush in our sugya, which is Lamaisa. Rashi is saying Mutter litzloi, you're allowed to move the utensil. How can you move the utensil? Surely that's tiltul min hatzad of the ash. The ash is Muktza, you're not allowed to move the ash. Now this isn't a question on the Gemara, because in the Gemara we're not interested in whether you can move the Keli. We're interested in whether the Keli becomes a bossis. That's what Rashi taught us on the Gemara, on the side of the Gemara. Rashi said that Mevatel Ki MeHechano isn't where you can't move the utensil because incidentally there happens to be Muktza inside it. Mevatel Ki MeHechano is when you're, as the word says, Mevatel Ki MeHechano, where you're making utensil Muktza by making it a bossis, and therefore it fundamentally becomes Muktza, and that's the problem with Mevatel Ki MeHechano. If you happen not to be able to move the utensil because there's Muktza sitting inside, that's not Mevatel Ki MeHechano. So the Magen Avraham has technically answered the question. Since his version is the ash is Muktza, but since it's of so minimal significance, so minimal chashivot, it doesn't make the Keli Muktza. Fine, so we resolved the Gemara. But Lamais, in his version, Rashi is saying Mutter litloi, you're allowed to move the utensil. How can you move the utensil? Surely you're moving Muktza by moving the utensil. So you have to say in the Magen Avraham a second chiddush, which is an interesting chiddush, that normally when you move the whole lomdus of tiltul min hatzad, of moving object A and through that moving object B, is that your action is relevant, is connected both to object A and object B. And therefore I'm moving Muktza, albeit indirectly. So if I have a pot which has coins in it, Muktza objects in it, I can't move the pot because the pot has become a bosses. Even if the pot hasn't become a bosses, if I move the pot, I'm moving the coins, and my action is relevant to the coins as much as it is to the pot, albeit indirectly. And therefore, by moving the pot, I'm moving coins. The Magen Avraham would have to say that by moving the pot, not only does the pot not become ash, not only does the pot not become a bosses to the soot, even though the soot is Muktza, but I can move the pot, because that's what Rashi says in the Magen Avraham's version. He says that you can move the pot mutter litloi. Why? Because it's not a bosses, and it's not considered moving the ashes. In other words, the ashes are of such minimal significance that my action isn't considered relevant to the ashes. My action is only shaykh to the pot, to the Keli, but not shaykh to the ashes, because the ashes are so irrelevant, the action doesn't connect itself to the ashes. So this is a chiddush in Hilchas Muktza, as it were, that even though tiltul min hatzadu is asa, indirect movement of an object is asa, the Magen Avraham is evidently of the view that you can have objects which are so insignificant that the movement doesn't connect to them in any meaningful way, and therefore I don't need to worry about the tiltul min hatzadu either. It again sort of brings out to our attention how Muktza is more nuanced than just either Muktza or not. Most Muktza objects, not only can you not move them, but you also can't move them indirectly. This is something which is of such trivial significance, I can't move it. If I move it indirectly, my movement has no meaningful engagement with the ash clouds, with ash powder, and therefore that's not even tiltul min hatzad. That seems to be the maths of the sugya according to the Magen Avraham.
The ashes are Muktza, but not Muktza enough to be over on moving tiltul min hatzad.
Correct. That's the Magen Avraham. The Rashi in our version says ash isn't Muktza. Why is that ash not Muktza? Shulchan Aruch says ash is Muktza. Answer says ash is Muktza, but little soot powder is like fluff on your coat. It's got no significance at all. It's not Muktza whatsoever. The Magen Avraham says no, the soot is Muktza, but it's not choshev enough A to make the Keli a bosses, and B is not choshev enough that when I move the Keli for my movement to be ascribed also as relevant to the soot. My movement is in the pot, and the soot is like an incidental side effect. It's not something that I'm acting upon, and therefore tiltul min hatzad doesn't make sense. That seems to me what you have to say in the Magen Avraham.
What's the definition of choshev? Is choshev something dependent on the size, objective, or could it be dependent on its status when Shabbat came in? Could a massive stone still be not choshev because it had no status of looks or whatever when Shabbat came in?
No, I don't. I know how to partially answer your question, but not completely. I don't know exactly what defines choshev. I mean, it is vague. We're discussing something of very, very minimal chashivas soot. I mean, it's like a powder, and even there's a bit of a machlokes. Rashi, as we have Rashi, seems to consider that not to be muktza. And the Magen Avraham says no. I think this is the same as ashes. So even that's a little unclear. But stone definitely this wouldn't apply to. A proper stone is mukta. Why? Because it's not mukhan for Shabbos, so that's mukta, and it definitely has the normal halachas of mukta. That's the classic example of something that has the normal halachas of mukta. Seems here, again, I mean, it's always difficult to know where the boundaries of the svara are. I don't know soot. I don't know what the dimensions of soot are there. They're probably micrometers in size. So if you begin pushing me, at 1 millimeter is something choshev, at 5 millimeters is it choshev, at 10. I don't know how to answer it. I have no idea. But soot, Rashi's of the opinion, is so trivial. It's just a dust powder. That's not choshev enough to be muktzah. That's Rashi's opinion. That's what comes out in the Gemara. I wanted to mention one other point on this line in the Gemara before we move on, which someone brought up in the last year and somehow it got lost in the conversation, and I just wanted to revisit it, if I can get it right. In the previous sugya, the Gemara also asked from Nitzotzos. Sorry, previous sugya in the last Amud, at the bottom of the last Amud. The Gemara also asked from Nitzotzos. Is that right? Noisin he asked on Nitzotzos on Rabbah, who holds, according to Rashi, Ein Kli Nitol. And the Gemara asked in the bottom of Mem Beis on the base, Eisvei Noisin Kli Chasaneh Lekabel Nitzotzos. And they were answered that Nitzotzos are shchichi, that Nitzotzos are common. So again, the Gemara there asked, how can you take a Kli and move it for the sake of the Nitzotzos? That's Ein Kli Nitol El Tzorech Davar HaNitol. And the Gemara answered, no, because it's not shchichi, and therefore that the Gezerah doesn't apply, as we discussed. Now, why doesn't the Gemara answer that Nitzotzos ein bahem manish? And as Rashi says, and then sorry, the answer to the Gemara is it's shchichi, yes. Why doesn't the Gemara? I'm sorry, yeah. The answer is it's shchichi and therefore it's not sorry, yeah. Why doesn't the Gemara answer like Rashi says that, like our Gemara? Forget Rashi. Why doesn't the Gemara answer like our Gemara that Nitzotzos ein bahem manish? And therefore, ein kli nittel doesn't apply to Nitzotzos. Rashi says Nitzotzos are mutter little on, you're allowed to move them. They're not Muktza. So if they're not Muktza, what's the Gemara's question in Membeis Amud Beis in Kli Nittel? So I have one of so I have 3 or 4 points. Sorry. Well, it's the same case. It's the same price, no? No. Where's the Gemara get from it, Vinash? No, sorry, I didn't mean to say that. If I said that, then I shouldn't have said it. So it's the same. Is it not the same? Is it the same price, sir? No, seems like has another couple of Nitzotzos. And by us, no, it's the same case, same scenario. And by us, the Gemara answers it's not Muktza, and there the Gemara says because of shchichi. Why doesn't the Gemara say it's not Muktza? That's a much better answer. If it's not Muktza, there's nothing to talk about. It's not ein kli nittel. Now, on the
I thought it's dealing with the case of Hatzala Mitsuya and Hatzala Ena Mitsuya, so that's why the shchichi is the relevant point to make.
The problem is that it circumvents the question if Nitzotzos is not Muktza. I always use this parable. If you're walking outside and I ask you, why are you not getting wet? And you answer because I've got an umbrella up. That may be a good answer if it's raining, but if it's not raining, there's a better answer, which is it's not raining, why should I get wet? So here, you always have to give one has to give the most fundamental answer as the most truthful answer. So the Gemara answers, it is Muktza and Nitzotzos, and you shouldn't really, but it's Hatzala because it's Shchich and therefore they didn't make the Gezerah. There's a better answer to give, which is it's not Muktza at all. Your whole question doesn't start. If I ask you a question, how can you put a cup on top of an apple? Surely ein kli nittel and circle and bottom. You say it's shchichi. That's ridiculous. Honestly, an apple's not Muktza. There's nothing to talk about. An apple is a fruit. So if Nitzotzos aren't Muktza, what's the Gemara talking about? It circumvents the Gemara. It's too fun. It's too good an answer. It's not an answer. It's saying it's not a question. It's not Muktza. There's nothing to talk about.
But isn't it just that these sparks are still falling? And while so Rashi says there, shal heves ane tefes.
Excellent. Yeah, excellent. Good. So there's 3 comments I want to make on this question. The first point is that according to the Magen Avraham, this isn't a question, because the Magen Avraham says that it's Muktza. He just says that they don't make the Kli bosses. So the Magen Avraham's version resolves this issue. According to our Gears in Rashi, he says the ashes are not Muktza, so we have a question. According to the Magen Avraham's version, the ashes are Muktza, it's just they don't make a bosses, so that resolves our issue. That's why the Gemara can't answer that over there. So that's point number 1. Point number 2 is that I'm a little in doubt about whether the question is a good question. If the reason why Nitzotzos aren't Muktza are because they're so insignificant, I'm wondering a little bit in my mind, and this is just vague speculation, maybe the logic of ein kli nittel still makes sense. The Gemara is not answering. There's different ways of understanding the Gemara. If the Gemara is answering that Nitzotzos aren't Muktza because they're really useful objects, they're not Muktza because they're useful to be used for, I don't know, medicinal properties. Everyone eats soot, that's right. Soot's a great food, and you flavour your food with soot. So it's not Muktza because it's a flavouring, it's a spice. Then we'd have a good question over here. What do you mean ein kli nittel? Soot's not Muktza. It's like an apple. It's a food product. But if the Gemara is answering that soot is too insignificant to be Muktza, I'm just wondering a little bit about how that translates across to ein kli nittel. If the logic of ein kli nittel is that the kli is not muchen with respect to a Muktza use, I'm wondering, is a kli muchen with respect to a fluff, use of dust and fluff and insignificant things. The Gemara is not answering that it's too useful to be Muktza. It's answering it's too insignificant to be Muktza. So maybe the Gemara in the earlier sugya, in Membeis on base, held that ein kli nittel also applies to something which is too insignificant to be Muktza. I put that forward as a piece of speculation.
It's a paradox anyway, because the fact is you've taken a kli to be recovered in Nitzotzos. So for you, there must be some sort of Yeshiva, there must be.
Yeah, okay, I'll come to your point in a minute. So for those online, Jeffrey's asking, you take the Keli because you do care about the Nitzotzos, and we'll come to that in a minute. Okay, a third answer, which is a well-founded answer and is Eliyahu's point, is that it seems we're talking about different stages. When you're putting the Keli to collect the Netzotzos, you're worried about the sparks. They're still in spark form. They're still a shalheves. They're still a spark with a little flame. They're still glowing embers. And therefore, you want to catch them at that point. At that point, of course, they're Muktza. They're hot, glowing embers. Our Gemara is saying that they don't make, they themselves cease to be Muktza once they become soot. And therefore, it's not called Mevatel Kli MeHechano. So if I'm using them to catch a spark, that's Ein Kli Nittel, because at that stage, they are still Muktza. Once they've settled in the Kli and they've become a mere soot, they don't make the Kli into a bosses because they're too insignificant, and they themselves are not Muktza because they're just soot and they're not significant. Yes.
I think that final.
By Rashi on Menzayin on the Gemara there, where he says Abraham Mamish Mishekavu.
Yes, I think it is supported by Rashi. Rashi on Menzayin who says Mishekavu Abraham Mamish. Once it's extinguished, it's Abraham Mamish. Sorry, someone online I think wanted to ask something also.
Yeah, I was going to say that same point.
Chavruta. Okay, very good, excellent. So Mishekavu, once it's extinguished, then that's Maduk and Rashi. Now, I want to say a ha'ara on that, which it got me thinking about, which is exactly what point does it make a transition from a spark to soot? If it makes the transition simultaneously with it landing in the Kli, then things work, because the Kli never held Muktza, never became bosses, never was Mevatel Kli MeHechano, and therefore everything's good. At the moment when I moved the Kli, I was doing it to catch the sparks, and therefore that was the purpose of it. With it landing in the Kli, it ceases to be, it's not Muktza because it's already extinguished and therefore goes out. Now, I'm a little uncertain as to the physics of it, so the logic of this, because the whole purpose of putting the Kli there is surely to stop the sparks igniting anything or damaging anything. If at the moment that they land in the Kli, they cease to be sparks and they're now soot, I'm not sure what damage they would do, unless you say the point of contact with the Kli is what extinguishes them and cools them down, and that does char or stain or do some damage to the item it's trying to collect. Now, what would be the problem of saying, why are you worrying about the choreography here? 5 seconds after it lands, it becomes a soot. Well, the problem I then have with it is that at least momentarily, the Kli is a bosses and does become a Muktza. In which case, we get caught up in the thorny issue, which we're not going to go into though, even though if those that looked up the sukkahs that Tosfos wrote maybe got dragged into this unwillingly, but I'm not going to get dragged into it, of the issue of a bosses lizman. Is there such a thing as a bosses lizman? And if it is that a problem of Mevatel Kli MeHechano? So just to summarize my final point, Eliyahu correctly pointed out, Adam and Joshua correctly pointed out, that Rashi seems to answer this question. Sparks are Muktza, soot is not Muktza. I'm now asking at what point does the transition occur? If the transition occurs some seconds later after the sparks lands, then we have a situation where at least momentarily for 5 seconds, it is Muktza and the Keli is a bossis and it does become bottle MeHechano. And let's just file that way as an interesting question to think about. Is there such thing as temporary bosses? Is there such thing as temporary bottle MeHechano? If the logic of Mevatel Kli MeHechano is, let's say it looks like Sosa, it looks like Boner, well, maybe you've done Sosa for a few seconds, or Boner for a few seconds, or maybe not. Maybe the whole concept doesn't make sense if it's temporary and it's not permanent. So I'm just pointing out that there is what to think about in this transition between sparks and soot and when that transition occurs. The final ha'ara I want to make is I don't really know what I'm talking about over here, and I'm completely muddled in this sugya. And as I said, someone mentioned this in the last year, and I didn't have time to follow up on it. And it sort of ties into Jeffrey's point also, which is what am I doing my action for when I take this Keli to try and catch the sparks? The Gemara on Membeis Amud Beis says that this is called Ein Kli Nittel. I'm moving the utensil in order to move it for the sake of an item Muktza. Am I moving the Keli for the sake of the sparks? Or am I moving the Keli for the sake of whatever I'm trying to protect? Jeffrey said, surely the sparks have a chashivas. There's a paradox. I'm trying to catch the sparks. It's true the sparks have a chashivas, but they have a negative chashivas. I don't want them. I'm not moving this Keli for the sparks. It may look like I'm trying to catch the Keli. In Hilchos bosses, it may become a bosses because it's become the receptacle for soot or sparks. But the purpose of my movement is not for the object falling into it. The purpose of the movement is for the object underneath it, that I don't want to get damaged or set alight by the sparks. So I don't really understand why this is included in the concept of ein kli nittel ela l'tzorech. I should really have asked this question on the earlier sugya. It was niggling in the back of my mind at the time, and then focus on it till I got to our sugya, and then began trying to compare and contrast the two sugyas, and got to this Rashi that says shalheves, and the issue is I'm doing it for the sake of the shalheves, and I was mulling over a version of Jeffrey's question, which is why am I actually moving this? And at that point, this niggle became the niggle became a clarity that I was unclear. It's a barrier. It's not. I'm not moving it for the sparks. I'm moving it to protect the object underneath, which is not Muktza. It's my tabletop, my tablecloth, whatever it is I want to protect. So, are you with me? Why is this Mevatel? Why is this ein kli nittel? I'm not moving it for the sake of the sparks. I'm moving it for the sake of a tablecloth, which is not Muktza at all. So, I'm sorry. I remain. It doesn't. I don't care. Right? I don't know. Interesting. Could be. Yeah. But whatever it is, I want to protect. As long as it's not Muktza, it's not Muktza. So.
Could it be because the bowl, because by virtue of being a bowl or a receptacle, it gathers things are makabel in
it. I hear, but therefore what, Josh? Finish off your sorrow. What's your point?
Therefore, yes, you are moving the bowl to save the table, but when a bowl is moved, it's always for the sorech of the thing going into it because it's a bowl. That's what a bowl does.
Yeah, I hear. I don't know. I mean, that's a chiddush. I hear. I don't know. You're saying fundamentally bowls collect things, and therefore, in essence, it's a collector. It's collecting the objects. It's for the sake of the object. Even though my intention is to protect my precious tablecloth underneath, nonetheless, my kli is catching. What I am doing is trying to catch the spark. Josh is saying that there's two layers of intentionality over here that we need to work out. One is what's my real motive. My real motive behind it is no doubt to protect the tablecloth. I don't want the tablecloth to catch a light. That's my in philosophy they call it. This is my primary purpose. But the secondary purpose, that because I want to protect the object, my aim now is to catch the spark. And therefore, what am I doing? I'm using the bowl to catch sparks, to catch soot, and therefore that's called. Mevatel, that's called the sorech davar nittel. My real aim is for the sake of my tablecloth, but my proximate aim is, they call it the proximate cause. My proximate aim, the closer aim, is to catch the spark, because that's what I want to do. I want to catch the spark. Yeah, I need to think about this, Josh. That's a nice answer. Yeah. No doubt is a good thing. I imagine that's why people are doing it, but good things aren't enough. Therefore, what? The point is that the fact is I want to catch the sparks. The reason I want to catch sparks is to protect my tablecloth. But what I want to do is catch sparks. Okay, good. We're nice. A chiddush can emerge from a Zoom live partnership. Very nice. Okay, yeah, good. I think it's a good answer. I heard one of you was muttering about Talaf also. Yeah, you're right. I mean, this is a question on the hemshech of the sugya also. The next line of the Gemara. And by the way, Josh, this tweaks your answer and proves it's not about the shape of a bowl, because the Gemara says you can put a pot over a fire so it doesn't catch hold of the beam. Now again, we have the same question over there. What am I moving this pot for? For the sake of the fire or the sake of the beam? For the sake of the beam. So why is this called ein kli nittel? And then we have and as the beam is a Muktza beam, it's built into the house. I didn't really know what to make of it. I was again mulling over the same thing. And then we have the Dalaf. Now again with the Dalaf, am I trying to catch the water, or am I trying to stop a flood and contamination? I assume if it's Muktza water, so it's dirty water. So I'm trying to catch the water to stop it flooding, not for the sake of the waters. Again, why is this ein kli nittel? So if these questions are right, the answer has to be something in line with your thinking, which is that the purpose is to stop my house flooding. But what I'm trying to do is contain water, and therefore that's called sorech davar nittel. What this tells us, Josh, if your sorrow is right, is that we need to do a lot of careful talk when we learn Hilchos Shabbos, and we have to ask ourselves not what my purpose is, but what am I actually doing in ein kli nittel, and what's my intention over here. So I need to think about this a little bit.
It sounds like it wouldn't work with the soul though, because the soul for the Efrochim, you turn it over and there's nothing in it. You're not.
I'm tweaking your story. I'm not saying your version of the story that it's to do with it being a kli, and a kli contains things. Certainly not in the case of kofen ka'or al also. I'm modifying your story. I'm improving your story a little bit, I think. And I'm saying it's not because it's a kli. I'm saying, what are you doing? You're trying to. I hear it quite well with the delaf and the nitzotus. I'm trying to catch nitzotus. I'm trying to catch it up. I hear it a little bit less well with the korah case and with the Efrochim case. But Efrochim case, don't forget, is bosses. It's not kli nitl the Torah. So we avoid these problems. Yeah.
So it makes the concept could say that you're trying to make a double shading argument.
Yeah.
This is actually separation.
Yeah, I don't want to mix terminology of melacha with terminology of muktza. But you're right. I mean, they're not philosophically, they're not radically different ideas.
Maybe you'll catch the spot, or maybe you won't catch the spot, and then that will apply. But yeah, you are definitely catching the spot.
Yeah, but you're correct what you're saying, but I don't think that the logic here isn't unintended side consequences or the like. You know, we all know what's going to happen, and we all intend it to happen. I want to catch the spark. I want the spark to be caught. I'm happy for the spark to be caught. But the reason I want it to be caught is to protect the tablecloth, and I have no interest really in the spark. It's got no chashivas to me. But I do want to catch the spark. So
I think it's closer to Lachashem and Super.
I think it might be close. It's a bit like when I catch a dangerous insect. It's not because I want the insects, it's because I don't want the insects. So I would compare it in my mind. I was thinking a bit of melachot, but this is a fatal path to follow to begin comparing muktza to melachos. So we're going to resist the temptation to draw analogies, and we're just going to zoom in on this. I don't want the delaf. I don't want the spark. I want to protect my house. That's clear. But it's still called moving it the Torah a little, because what I'm trying to use the item for, whether upturns or not, that in terms of, in fact, I'm clear, Josh, I'm getting a little clearer on the sorrow, and it's maybe I'm moving back to the way you said it. We're talking about using kelim. What am I using my keli for? To catch water or to catch sparks. So in terms of use, the Torah Nitl, it may be even a mistake that we're sort of thinking about too much about the intentionality of the person. Maybe we need to ask ourselves, what am I using my utensil for? Using utensil for something of muktzah is a problem, and I'm using it for something of muktzah. I think we all need to reflect upon these points. I'm finding myself torn a little bit around these forest. I don't care about the water. I'd be quite happy if the water disappeared. I'd be quite happy if the sparks disappeared. I don't even need to use a kli for it. If I could spread a plastic sheet, I'd also be happy. So on the other hand, I am using a kli and I am catching this, and that's what I'm doing. I'm catching water. I'm catching sparks. So we have a night to sleep on this. Yeah.
How can you ignore melachos on Shabbat?
We're not in the parsha of Melacha over here. We're in the parsha of Muktza. Nothing to do with Melacha.
Right, you're always in the parsha of Machshava.
Sorry, we're in the parsha of Muktza. We're not in the parsha of Melacha. We're in the parsha of Muktza over here.
Yeah, but it's to do with action. It's not to do with Melacha. What you're doing.
Correct. Correct. No.
And Machshava defines your.
No, Muktza is fundamentally not about actions. Muktza is about preparedness of utensils, functionality of utensils. The things I can't do if the Keli isn't prepared for it. It's a different angle of looking at things. Muktza is about use of utensils. It's about use and ishtamshus. It's not about external projection of self and action, which is what Melacha is about. So it's a different mindset. As much as the analogies can be fun to consider for 10 seconds, it's the road to confusion in the subject to take the analogy too far. It's a different conceptual way of thinking. Okay, what I will say is, Rabbi said this is learning, what we're doing now. We're hearing a svara, we're weighing up, I need to think this through. It's probably a good svara because we have a Gemara that we need to answer over here. But this is Lomdas, this is learning. What conceptually is the way to view the action? Is the way to view the action an act of protecting my tablecloth, protecting my house, so houses clean it'll, or no, that as Josh is arguing, the action is what am I using my utensil for? To catch water, to catch sparks, and therefore that's clean it'll. So that's good. That's a nice place to finish in for now. On Sunday, Mitzvah Hashem, we will move on to the next line of the Gemara. Koyosh and Ishbra. That will be our next topic. We do need to work our way through the Gemara and move on. Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you so much for that contribution.
Thanks.